All right, guys, good morning. Today we're going to talk about absolute location. We've learned about relative location, which, as you remember, is giving the location of a place or where you are based on other things like natural features or landmarks that might be around it. Okay, that's relative location. Today we're going to talk about absolute location. And as we learn about absolute location, there's a few key things that I'm going to have you do today. First, we are going to go through a little PowerPoint, little slides. They'll be right here. And what I want you to do is write down my perfect definition of each of the keywords. And then in your composition book, you're also going to add a little picture. And you got to outdo me in the picture drawing, okay? So right away, let's get rocking and rolling. Let's get some definitions going here. So absolute location, this means the exact location on the map. Okay, so go ahead and put that on your composition. In your composition book, you want to have a good definition, and then you also want to draw a little picture of this, the exact location on a map. Let's talk about some examples. One example of absolute location is your address. So, like, for example, Jimmy, your address is? Okay, so that would be absolute location. You're giving me the house number, you're giving me the street, city, state, and zip code. That's giving me absolute location. Another example of absolute location is when we talk about latitude and longitude, and we're measuring location on a map. So for latitude and longitude, let's talk about each of these. Latitude are lines that run east and west all the way around the globe. And we'll get some examples right here on the screen. Go ahead and write down a good definition of latitude right now. Imaginary lines running east and west around the earth. Right now, I want you to get this down word for word in your composition books. We're going to get some time to practice with this, but for right now, get it in your notes. Let's draw a picture of it so that we see that latitude lines are the ones that go east and west around the globe. The most famous latitude line, yep, you probably already know it, it's the equator. Latitude measures the distance from the equator. So at 0 degrees latitude, that's the equator. Latitude is going to measure the distance above and below the equator, the distance north of the equator and the distance south of the equator. On your maps, which you should have in front of you, right now I want you to, with your dry erase marker, you're going to draw a line right on the equator. Find it. It's labeled there for you. Highlight right where the equator is. That is 0 degrees latitude. Okay, so you've got it in your composition book. You've got it right there in your map in front of you. Okay, we are doing awesome. The other part of absolute location, when we're looking at location on a map, is longitude. So we've got latitude lines that run east and west. A good way to remember latitude is they run laterally or sideways or east to west around the earth. Longitude lines are imaginary lines that run north and south around the earth. Okay, so let's get this definition right here. Imaginary lines running north and south around the earth. Longitude measures the distance from the prime meridian. The prime meridian is 0 degrees longitude. Right now, on your map, get your highlighter and highlight 0 degrees longitude, the prime meridian. It runs through England, which is Western Europe. Okay, so find England, find 0 degrees longitude, and go ahead and highlight that on your map. Now longitude, the best way to remember longitude are running north and south. They're long. Longitude lines are long and they run north and south. They're measuring the distance from the prime meridian. Now, Now that we've got all of this in our notes, let's talk real briefly and clear some things up, because where absolute location gets a little tricky is in writing the location. Latitude lines run east and west, but they are measuring the distance north of the equator and south of the equator. Look at your map. Find 15 degrees north on the map. It's labeled 15N. What that means is 15 degrees north of the equator. So here's where it gets a little tricky. Latitude lines run laterally, they run side to side, they run east to west, but they're measuring north of the equator. Longitude lines run north to south, and they measure the distance from the prime meridian, and they're measuring east and west. Okay, so right now find 15 degrees west. It's going to be set on your map, it's going to be labeled as 15W, 15 degrees west. Now, when we're looking for absolute location, what I want you to do right now, I want you to find Boise, Idaho on your map. Okay, find Boise, Idaho. And I'm going to have you write down the absolute location in your composition book. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to find it and then write it down. Now, you'll see that Boise, Idaho is not exactly on one of the lateral lines. It's also not on one of the longitude lines. It's not on latitude, it's not on longitude. It's in between some of the ones that are on the map. So you're going to have to make a bit of a guess here. So if we're looking at 40 degrees latitude, we want to, and the next line is 45, and Boise's in between there at about 43. Then let's write 43 degrees north. We're always going to write latitude first and then longitude. Okay, so go ahead and write that down in your notes. The absolute location of Boise, Idaho is 43 degrees north, 113 degrees west. Some of you should have gotten that. Go ahead and check that you have that correct in your notes. 43 degrees north, 113 degrees west. Now, we're going to launch into a pretty fun activity here, but it's the game Battleship. But we're going to play it as a class. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand out all the cards, and the first round will just be like a practice, and it won't really count against you or anything like that. We're going to play about 5 or 6 games today. And as we're playing Battleship, I'm going to read off the absolute location. I'm the one firing at everybody's ships. So if you haven't played Battleship before, we'll go through the directions. And you've got a handout there with the directions on it, and we'll review that together in just a moment.